You're checking in with the doctor for your daily fantasy football update.
Oh, yeah.
The best thoughts, opinions, advice, and random fantasy talk in the biz.
You heard the man.
So here he is, your host of Doc's Office, Dr. Fantasy himself, Jordan Jaika. Jordan Jaika.
All right, what's crackin' Fantasy Bays? Welcome to Doc's Office. You are checking in with Dr. Fantasy. Jordan Jaika here. Happy Friday afternoon. Hope everybody's ready for the weekend. So what I wanted to talk about today was the rookie quarterback class a little bit. We have some dynasty rookie drafts that are starting. I've already completed a few. And one of the common themes that I'm seeing with these rookie quarterbacks is that Zach Wilson has yet, in any draft that I've been taken in or participated in, is yet to be drafted ahead of Trey Lance or Justin Fields, which I think is a little interesting that it seems like the consensus in the fantasy community has been Zach Wilson is ahead of those two guys. And I'm a big Justin Fields fan. I'm glad that he landed in Chicago. I think he has some decent weapons there. And we'll break all of these guys down a little further today. I don't want to get too in depth. This is more about Zach Wilson, but I think it's interesting coming in as the number 2 overall pick. I know the number one concern, I think, with Wilson is him being a part of the New York Jets. But I'm going to talk a little more about that and kind of my thoughts surrounding that. And I mean, it's just even when you look at a lot of people's rankings, Zach Wilson very consistently is coming in behind Trey Lance and Justin Fields. I won't say every rankings that I've seen Zach Wilson has been behind them, but a good 90% of the rankings that I've looked at, Zach Wilson has been behind those two. And so let's kind of jump into it. Number one, I said he's on the New York Jets. I'll tell you why. This is definitely a concern. I know my buddy CJ from the NFL Fantasy Report loves to go back and look at the deep history of Jets quarterbacks and their lack of success since Joe Namath. And the average Jets quarterback only starts for 2.6 seasons. So those odds aren't fantastic. They are. And they've had some pretty high profile picks that they've used on quarterbacks. So it's not like, I talked about that with Trevor Lawrence. What talent have the Jets or the Jaguars really drafted except Trevor Lawrence? Blake Bortles? No. I mean, Blake Bortles was already a questionable prospect coming into the NFL. So the Jets have had some high picks. They've spent some high draft capital. So they've really swung and missed every single time. So why could Zach Wilson be different this time? Number one, I have a lot of faith in Robert Saleh as an NFL head coach. I'm not going to lie. He was a great defensive mind in San Francisco, but a lot of his players speak very highly around him. They played hard for him. I think he's a guy that's going to come. I've always said there's two different kinds of coaches. There's guys that are X and O's kind of guys, and there's guys that are motivators and team builders. And I really think Robert Saleh has the potential to be an incredible team builder, changing the culture in New York. I think that's a huge benefit to Zach Wilson. They brought in Mike LaFleur to be the offensive coordinator. That should change the dynamic of that offense compared to what we've seen with the wonderful offensive scheme of Adam Gase the past few seasons. But I think there's some more positives to the Jets, and people are giving the Jets credit for because they're the Jets, and why would we ever want to give them credit? But I think the reality is that they're building something bigger. We saw Mekhi Becton perform pretty well on that offensive line as a rookie. Trading up for Elijah Vera Tucker, I think, was very key in this year's draft. They're showing for the first time in my lifetime that I can remember, not only do we have our franchise quarterback, but we're really committed to setting him up for success. So that's one of the things that I think is promising. And if you don't know much about Zach Wilson, just watch some highlights and watch some of the games that he played. And he has incredible arm talent. Absolutely incredible arm talent. A lot of people are calling his rise in draft stock. They're comparing it to Patrick Mahomes in the past. I mean, obviously Wilson went even higher than Mahomes, and Mahomes was arguably, or he definitely was, a more productive college quarterback than Zach Wilson was. But this guy has the arm to make all the throws in the NFL, and I think he could be the kind of talent that could transcend an organization, similar to what we saw with Justin Herbert last season, what we've seen with Mahomes in the past, and some of these younger gunslingers. Zach Wilson's mobility is very underrated, and I think that's one of the things that people look at Justin Fields, they look at Trey Lance, and they go, holy cow, these guys can absolutely fly. Zach Wilson has a lot of ability too, similar to when Josh Allen came to the league. Josh Allen was a mobile quarterback, but we didn't necessarily have him pegged as being a guy that was going to rush a ton in the NFL, but he's consistently been able to have 8 to 10 touchdowns a season. And I think that's an underrated part of Zach Wilson's game. He had 10 rushing touchdowns last season at BYU. Completion percentage, and that's one of the things when I look at his arm talent, just the strength and all the throws that he can make. He reminded me of Josh Allen coming out a little bit, except he was a bit more accurate than Josh Allen. He was more Josh Allen accurate of last season. So Wilson had a 73.4 completion percentage in college last year. So I think there's a lot of things going in the right direction. One of the things that I thought was kind of interesting was one of his comparables in terms of his physical measurables was to Johnny Football, Johnny Manziel. And I saw that and I kind of went, ouch, that was his best comparable. So that hurts a little bit. But one of the things I really like about Zach Wilson is I think he's committed to playing and being the franchise guy of a New York sports team. He came in, he talked to a lot of the legends of the past from the New York sports market. I think he's really committed to not only being a great quarterback, but being a great leader for that team. So I love his attitude. That's one of those things that maybe people aren't going to relate directly to fantasy production, but I really like the attitude that he's coming in with. And with that arm talent, even though the weapons around him are not ideal right now, I think arm talent like his can transcend an organization based on what I've seen. He has that upside. However, I would also argue that he has potentially the lowest floor of any of these quarterbacks. I think most people would have Justin Fields pegged in that category, but I think that Justin Fields gets a pretty bad rap personally. So Zach Wilson has all that arm talent, but if the Jets are not able to build this culture successfully, it's going to be hard for him. It really is. But in today's NFL, when you have that kind of arm talent, it's hard not to be successful, especially when they're already showing signs of being committed to building that offensive line. His weapons aren't the most ideal with Denzel Mims, Corey Davis, Jamison Crowder. I liked the pick of Elijah Moore in the draft, but that's not terrible. It's better than what they've had in the past. That's not an ideal or, top half of the league in terms of the weapons that they have, but it's solid. It's better than what we've seen them have in the past. So let's compare these three guys. Why right now is Zach Wilson going below them? Number one, let's look at their offensive lines. I mentioned they're starting to build a younger, better offensive line, but they were the 29th ranked offensive line last season. The Bears and Justin Fields I shouldn't say Justin Fields. He wasn't on the Bears last season, but they had the 20th ranked offensive line. And then you have the 49ers and Trey Lance, who had the 9th ranked offensive line last season. When you look at the offensive schemes, the Jets, I mentioned, coming in with Mike LaFleur. Last season, the Jets had the 28th most pass attempts, so towards the bottom of the league. However, LaFleur in San Francisco last year, they had the 16th most pass attempts, so a little more balanced. And so that goes with Trey Lance, 16th in pass attempts last season, the 49ers were. And we'll see how that offense changes. I don't think it's going to change significantly this season, but we'll see. And then the Bears were 9th in pass attempts, so once again, pretty favorable from a fantasy standpoint. When looking at these three teams too, I would say the Jets have the worst defense. So there's going to be a little more pressure on Zach Wilson and that offense to put up numbers because they'll most likely be playing from behind, but that does lead to more fantasy production normally. When you're looking specifically at the offensive lines and their pass protection, not just the unit as a whole, Darnold had the 37th best pass protection last year among all qualified quarterbacks. The Bears last season ranked 16th. And then the 49ers had the number one protection rate in the NFL. So Trey Lance going into a very ideal situation. Then if you look at their weapons, I mentioned the Jets' weapons. The Bears have Allen Robinson. Darnell Mooney looked really good. Montgomery in the backfield. Cole Kmet, I think, is going to be productive. 49ers with Kittle, Debo, Ayuk, and let's be honest, Kyle Shanahan's an asset to that offense as well. So when you look at offensive line, scheme, the weapons around them, Zach Wilson right now has the worst in all of those categories. So I think Zach Wilson, rightfully so, is going behind Justin Fields and Trey Lance. In the short term, I think that's what we're looking at. I think if you're in a redraft league, Zach Wilson should be the last of these. Well, Trey Lance, we don't know if he's going to be starting from day one. Same with Justin Fields. So Zach Wilson's most likely going to be going second. But by the end of the year, all four of these guys, if you throw Trevor Lawrence in there, are going to be starting in the league. So, I think by the end of it, Zach Wilson could find himself on the bottom of that list in terms of redraft production. But when we're looking at dynasty leagues, I understand why Zach Wilson is going behind these guys, but an arm talent like that can transcend an organization. We saw Josh Allen change the entire way that the Bills offense operates last season. And I don't love using that example because the improvement that Josh Allen made last season is uncanny. We've never seen that before, ever. I mean, he had one of the biggest completion percentage jumps in NFL history. And I believe he actually finished with the number one overall biggest jump from one season to another in terms of completion percentage. So I don't love comparing him to that, but he has that kind of ability. He has mobility that people don't give him credit for. So I think Zach Wilson, this is the kind of guy we could be saying right now, we're going to take him behind these guys. But I think by the time it's all said and done, if the Jets continue to build that offensive line and a great culture, I think that Zach Wilson could finish as the second best quarterback in this class. I still love Justin Fields. He's still my number two guy. Trey Lance is an ideal situation. Trey Lance ran for 1,100 yards in 2019, so the guy is mobile as mobile can be. But I think Zach Wilson and what the Jets are doing, they're building something really special. So I would argue he carries the most risk right now because of the organization that he's a part of. But you could be looking at quite the steal. If you're in a 2 QB or super flex league and he's dropping a little bit. So that's kind of my thoughts on Zach Wilson. I think rightfully so. He's going behind Fields and Trey Lance at this point. But when you have elite arm talent like that, and it usually leads to success. We've seen very few guys with that kind of arm talent who are surrounded with the right pieces that haven't had success. And I think the Jets are trying to rectify their wrongs with Sam Darnold because I think Sam Darnold has that kind of arm talent to where he could have been a franchise quarterback, but they kind of ruined him with Adam Gase and company. So if Zach Wilson, they're committed to building around him, which it looks like they are already day one day of Zach Wilson being a Jets and the Jets drafting. They already committed and surrounded him with more weapons than they did in Sam Darnold's entire 4 seasons there, 3 seasons with the Jets. So already they've committed to him more on day one. So I think that's promising. I love Robert Saleh. I think he could end up being a top 10 head coach in this league. I really like what he's bringing there, and I'm looking forward to seeing what he can do. There's a lot on Zach Wilson right now where Trey Lance can come in with not a lot of pressure, probably not even going to start day one. Same with Justin Fields with Andy Dalton being in Chicago. But I mean, the reality is talent tends to thrive overall. And there was people that said the same thing. I feel like I wasn't a big Justin Herbert fan coming into the NFL last season. I thought, he had all the arm talent. Some people question his attitude a little bit. And what he proved to me last year was arm talent. If you have the talent to make every throw in the NFL, then at the end of the day, that's all that matters. And the Chargers have a better supporting cast. Their offensive line was terrible, though. So, and Justin Herbert and that arm talent you can say what you want, the scheme, the offensive line, the weapons, X, Y, and Z. But at the end of the day, if you're talented enough, you're going to be able to transcend beyond all of those negative factors. So that's what I was kind of down on Zach Wilson in the beginning of this process. But the more you watch him and the more you watch the throws that he can make, I know at BYU, one of the things that does concern me is he had a very clean pocket. They had one of the best offensive lines in the country last season, rated by Pro Football Focus, and he didn't have great success under pressure. So I'm interested. I think that could be a really key differentiating factor to him if he's able to stand in the pocket and make throws when he's under pressure, because he's going to be under pressure in year one. So I think that's going to have be a big piece of his development. He also didn't look very often behind his first read, and I think that's where he struggled a little bit in those situations where he was stuck on his first read, and if that first read wasn't open, he wasn't great at looking and finding his second, third, fourth options on each play. So I think there are some negatives, even though he has that arm talent, but a lot of it, we said the same thing about Justin Herbert coming out of Oregon. Was this a pro enough system? And he threw a lot of screens there. He's got the big arm, but can he throw the deep ball? And he kind of laughed in everybody's face, said, "Screw you, I can do all of that." And I have the feeling a lot of us are sleeping on Zach Wilson, and he's going to do the same thing. So drop a comment below. Tell me, what do you think of Zach Wilson? Are you taking him ahead of Trey Lance or Trevor Lawrence for that matter? I saw a mock draft where somebody took Zach Wilson ahead of Trevor Lawrence. I'm not brave enough to do that because I think Trevor Lawrence is a generational quarterback, as do most people. But drop below. Let me know, what do you think about Zach Wilson? Do you think he can be a part of the culture change in New York? That's all that I have for this Friday. Just a quick little conversation about Zach Wilson. We'll keep talking about some prospects over the next few weeks. So make sure you tune in, subscribe to Doc's Office on YouTube and wherever you listen to podcasts. But for now, have a nice weekend and peace out, Girl Scouts.